Hi everyone, my name is Nicola Hemmings. I'm a researcher in the Department of Animal and Plant Sciences here in Sheffield, where I study animal reproductive behaviour and physiology, and I also do a lot of work in the area of science communication. First of all, happy International Women's Month. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this STEMinism event. Please accept my apologies for not being there in person. In fairness, I think I've got a pretty good excuse. This is Alice. She was born 12 days ago. In fact, she actually began her descent on International Women's Day on the 8th. That was her due date, but in the end she held out until the 9th to actually arrive. I did wonder if she'd gone on strike in support of the Day Without a Woman campaign. She came in the end, at least. In fact, Alice is really the reason I decided to make this video, the motivation for me wanting to talk to you today, despite not actually being able to be there. I was asked to talk about my experiences as a woman in STEM, but the last 9-ish months represent a particularly significant time in my research career, a time when I've experienced quite a roller coaster of emotions, hopes and fears with respect to my future in science. I've gone from being just a woman in science to being a science mum, and this has really given me a whole new perspective on the issues that women in science face. So rather than giving you an account of scientist me, past and present, I thought I would instead talk to you about a few of these hopes and fears that I have for future scientist me, in light of my most recent, and I would argue most impressive, accomplishment. I'm sure as attendees of this STEMinism event, you are already aware of the many challenges that face women in STEM careers. And it's no secret that the progression from PhD study and or temporary postdoctoral research contracts, which are what start off most people's scientific careers, the progression from those positions up to more senior, independent, and dare I say it, permanent academic positions represents quite a strangled bottleneck for women. Well, in fairness, it's a strangled bottleneck for everyone, but women are disproportionately affected, and there's good evidence for that. Now, this is particularly pertinent for me because the early career researcher transitional zone is where I find myself right now. I'm up against the cream of the crop of young researchers, all clamouring for the severely limited number of positions available on the next rung of the academic ladder. And yet, instead of competing in the only way us young scientists know how, by being the obscenely productive, workaholic, rising star that all the evidence suggests I need to be, here I am instead with a brand new baby, a summer of maternity leave ahead, which I should add is far more appealing than my pre-baby self would have ever imagined. And that's without even considering the impact of the hazy fog that enveloped most of my pregnancy. These are not the best conditions for early career productivity. So my fears for future scientist me are fairly obvious. I fear that having a baby at this stage in my career will hurt my chances of progressing further in science. There is no doubt that being pregnant and having a young child will leave a negative mark on my academic record, and this will be in the form of a reduced publication rate, reduced grant application success. These are two key things that I need to arm myself with as I strive to further my academic career. The damage has already begun. It started the moment morning sickness hit during the early stages of my pregnancy, and this was a bit of a shock. No one warned me that the 9 months spent growing the baby would be such a challenge. I realised that my productivity would be hit when she arrived, but I didn't realise that it would be hit so early on in pregnancy as well. Now, I've learned that it's actually physically impossible to maintain your typical workload when you're pregnant or when you're caring for a new baby. And to be honest, anyone who says or pretends otherwise is doing a disservice to other women in science who want to have kids. We need to be honest and open about these things and have realistic expectations for ourselves and others in this position. Now, the big issue with combining a research career with motherhood is that the transition to independence for so many early career researchers coincides almost perfectly with the time that many of us are thinking about starting a family. I've just turned 32. I always thought I'd have a baby towards the end of my 20s, but when that time came, I was in the middle of my very important postdoctoral experiments, and that time just didn't seem right. So I put it off. But as someone who researches fertility, I was acutely aware that with each year that passed, the risk of problems associated with my pregnancy were increasing. In an ideal world, I'd have waited until I secured a big grant or a fellowship with several years' security, but this is not an ideal world, and I might have been waiting for a very, very long time. So, have I chosen my life over my career by making the decision to start a family at this stage? This is what I've been conditioned to think, that these two things are not compatible, and ultimately I have to make a choice. I was effectively told this during my undergraduate and postgraduate degrees, but I don't think this needs to be the case, and I really don't think this is what we should be telling young women as they embark on their science careers. Instead, we should be encouraging and supporting the combination of family and academic life. We should be highlighting the advantages that an academic career has in terms of flexibility, job satisfaction. I really think the fact that I love my job and I find every day interesting will have an extremely healthy influence on my daughter as she grows up. So here are my hopes for the future, for future scientist me and other science mums. I hope that we can create a more positive environment for mothers and mothers-to-be, a more inviting career path, so that we don't lose some of our most talented researchers simply because they aren't prepared to compromise on other aspects of their life. I hope that I can be part of that, showing other young women that it is possible to have a happy family life, to enjoy your children and forge a successful career doing this job that we love. How can we achieve this positive environment? Well, I don't propose to have all the answers, but I do know what would have helped me during my undergrad and PhD when I was worrying about these things as I made the decision whether or not to pursue a career in academia. Of course, we need to be aware of gender issues in science, and we need to acknowledge that they exist, but we mustn't simply stop there and dwell on those problems. We have work to do, and I believe it needs to be less focused on talking about the problems and more focused on affecting positive change. So for a start, let's celebrate successful science mums and highlight the fact that they actually aren't as rare as is often made out. I know lots of mothers who have forged very successful careers in science. I also know many fantastic young women in science who plan to have children in the near future, but who do not plan to leave academia. So as a community, let's eliminate this dangerous proposition that having a baby makes a woman less capable of being a successful scientist. With saying that, let's also recognise that having a baby will inevitably impact productivity. How could it not? Let's have an open, honest conversation about how we deal with this fairly. Reduced productivity doesn't mean reduced creativity, rigour, or general research excellence. Let's encourage a quality over quantity mindset, which would be beneficial, to be honest, for science in general, regardless of whether researchers are mothers or not. Let's also understand that young mums may not be able to, or even want to move their families around the world, or even up and down the country every year or so. And let's not penalise them for this. And most importantly, let's dispel the myth that the only way to succeed in academia is to be the most aggressively competitive workaholic in the candidate pool. After all, there's absolutely no reason why we should expect these qualities, if you want to call them that, to correlate with scientific ability anyway. What I hope most of all is that other women in science mums and mums-to-be, will support each other in creating this positive environment by kicking against the stereotypes and stigmas that currently exist, being honest about their experiences, and actively helping and promoting each other. Surely these issues are much better solved through collaboration than competition. So I hope you found my thoughts on this subject interesting and useful. I hope you will have further discussion on this topic afterwards. I'm really keen to hear your thoughts. Do feel free to contact me for open discussion via Twitter. Of course, you can also email me. And if you want to visit my blog page, you can also read some of the other articles I've written about being a scientist before pregnancy, during pregnancy, and going forwards. I'm sure there'll be many posts about being a scientist mum as well. For now, I'm off for a day of feeds, cuddles and nappy changes, so enjoy the rest of this STEMinism event. Thank you very much.